The birds are joining us, and that draws my attention to the fact that not only is this area behind us, this whole area is the area that's proposed to be paved and concreted. A proposal by the City of Melbourne to move that court, which has been there next to the historic South Yarra Primary School for longer than we all know, and the South Yarra Primary School's been there since about 1860. Someone proposed, without us knowing, to move it here, make it larger, multi-purpose court, do a concrete skate rink around it, and a raised concrete edge and bank where they can, go on with bikes and scooters and jump, etc., and put in night sports lighting. And introduce, in order for them to get there, 2 curved cycle skate paths from there to here. I'm Bea McNicholas. I direct a thing called Walk in St Kilda Road Environs and looks after heritage and gardens in this area but supports them everywhere. And there are several issues we're going to be looking at. Steve Calhoun. There are several issues we're going to be looking at today, and one is the heritage values of the park, which we love, and which you see in front of you in its full glory and splendour today. And that is the most impressive evidence you have of the value of the heritage listing of this park. It's right in front of your eyes. But there are also serious issues, administrative issues, process issues, consultation issues to do with the conduct of this by the City of Melbourne, and that's not to do with Heritage Council matters, that's to do with our City of Melbourne Council and the fact that most of us were omitted from consultation on this plan, and now it's too late to have your input unless they lose at Heritage Victoria. I live 4 doors from Fawkner Park at that end. The City of Melbourne stated on the 24th of September at a council meeting where Deputy Lord Mayor Aaron Wood proposed a motion for the City of Melbourne to appeal the decision of Heritage Victoria this year to refuse a permit for the proposed construction work here in Fawkner Park. And he presented that he thought they should appeal it. And I do recommend that you all go to Google City of Melbourne meeting 24th of September, because there's an audio of their discussion there, and that will tell you all you need to know. And there's a lot of misinformation presented to councillors who voted there. But 4 of the councillors did vote against it. So 4 of them knew the issues.
Did you say 4 voted against the 4 against Aaron Wood? Or?
4 voted against appealing to the Heritage Council. The issues are that green grassland, paving on green grass removes parkland, is the view of many people. And this Fawkner Park is heritage listed for its green spaces and for sports and passive recreation also on green grass spaces, which are in between heritage pathways, which are straight lines and a tree line. And once you know the history of the heritage paths, it's even more important that you don't start introducing additional curved paths into the grid. These straight lines, which, you can't walk straight down from Toorak Road West to the hospital, for example. You walk that way, then on another straight road that way. And I used to wonder why until I studied the heritage listing. When the Europeans and others came in the 1700s and 1800s, they already found here dirt tracks in exactly these positions where the Aboriginals had been walking on them maybe for thousands of years. So they started walking on them too, and now we all walk on them and they're paved. So once you know the history of that, you see how important the grid is. And it's heritage listed to protect that grid, and we would like to see that happen. There are a lot of sports areas and parks and urban areas and skate areas in Melbourne, and we don't think it's appropriate to introduce them in this context given the heritage listing of magnificent Fawkner Park. I think we all need to support heritage as well generally and respect it, and I think we should demand that our council does that as well. There's a reason why it's heritage listed, and Fawkner Park was heritage listed on the 1st of September of 2016, and the statutory managers of Fawkner Park is the City of Melbourne. So it's their duty of care, one, to protect the listed heritage values on the Victorian Heritage Register for Fawkner Park. And two, those of us who live in the City of Melbourne, it's their duty of care to look after us. And we generally want them to respect the heritage listed values of the heritage places in the City of Melbourne. So it's a bigger picture issue as well than just this work. And there are a few more speakers.
The key point,
till the end, please, no
is
interjecting.
that the City of Melbourne did not properly consult. We know the radius that they put out was not sufficient. They didn't actually survey many of the park users, and they should have, and they in fact didn't take the steps that they should have to do the proper consultation. And only now are we seeing a decision by the City of Melbourne to start talking to people. So we pray that they do engage.
If you all Google Council meeting City of Melbourne 24th of September, there is an audio of the entire discussion to do with the motion. And they admit that they didn't do adequate
They've actually said that
consultation.
themselves.
Now let me show you what they say at the meeting, seeing you brought that up. They stated at the meeting, 3 of the councillors discussed how they've been inundated with communications from constituents saying that they weren't mailed in the formative stages before the plan was formed, which was 2017, and before the February-March Future Melbourne Committee meeting. And be quiet! Aaron Woods, the councillor who's put the motion forward to appeal, is just generally saying something that's not specific. And Sally Capp, the Lord Mayor, comes in and says, well, let's just solve this. She says, you're saying there's been a lot of complaints there wasn't adequate community consultation in the mailing before the plan was formed and presented to Future Melbourne Committee in early 2018. And she said, well, let's check with the officer. And she asked Kim, the officer. And Kim, the officer, says, she said to tell me what the obligation for mailing before it was presented to Future Melbourne Committee was. And Kim says it was to mail people who live within or reside or work within 500 metres of the proposed works. And Sally Capp said, so those who live within 500 metres of the proposed works should have been mailed before Future Melbourne Committee meeting. Now I can tell you, I live 4 doors to the north, I wasn't mailed, and no one I know to the north was mailed. No one I know to the west was mailed. Now, I took a map showing 500 metres from the City of Melbourne website, and I adjusted it to go from exactly that spot where it is, so that the 500 metres is calculated by the firm who's on the City of Melbourne website. And you can all come and look at this later, but it shows, that's the proposed works, it shows that all the people who live on Terek Road West should have been mailed and weren't. All of the people going 3/4 or halfway down the streets all to the north here, which includes Leopold Park, Walsh, Marn, etc., should have been mailed. All of the people who live in that area on the west of the park and this side of St Kilda Road should have been mailed, and in St Kilda Road, and some of the people there in those high rises who are in the city of Port Phillip should have been mailed. Now on this side there's a man here today, this man tells me he lives in Pasley Street. He said he wasn't mailed, and he lives right there. So there's a real issue. This was in the formation plan. The City of Melbourne also admits in that they developed the plan, they said, years ago, and they've worked on it. They spent a lot of money working on it for about 8 years, and it didn't begin as a redevelopment of Fawkner Park, which is what it's turned out to be. It began as an investigation to some improvements at Pasley Street North Corner, and they worked on a very small group of people consisting of some people from that school and some people from Pasley Street. And at some point in their long discussions that we knew nothing about, they decided to move the court for here and extract all these other things. And so we weren't alerted to it by not being mailed. And I see or walk in the park every day, and I didn't know about it until after the Future Melbourne Committee meeting when
Did you
Jennifer...
not see the notices?
No, they put those up. They didn't tell us up. They put the notices up this year because they had so many.
They're explaining after the event, unfortunately. They conceded.
It's on the tape.
They told me directly they didn't consult.
The Heritage Victoria can't appear, I assume, because they're the tribunal
Heritage
who made
Victoria
the
can't
decision.
appear because they have to be
So
objective.
who appears to oppose the City of Melbourne at the appeal
All
before
the
the Heritage
people
Council?
who are invited to the Heritage Council It's City of Melbourne opposing the decision of Heritage Victoria.
Yeah, but who's
so
appealing?
Heritage Victoria appear, and anyone who wrote a submission to Heritage Victoria this February, which includes David and myself and Steve and lots of other people here,
so the council have
they
QCs,
got a letter saying,
council
do you
have
want to
QCs appearing
exactly.
in the appeal, and the rest of us will just be left to our own devices.
No, I've got suggestions of what you can still do. Can I leave that till just at the end because there are two more speakers? I'll just mention two criteria that are listed on the legal heritage listing of Fawkner Park on the Victorian Heritage Register. It is listed for criterion E, which is called importance in exhibiting particular aesthetic characteristics. And the quote from the Heritage Council listing is, the treed avenues have matured to form the dominant landscape component of the site, providing overarching umbrageous walks, counterpointed with expanses of lawn in between the avenue alignments. Now, we all think that would be breached by putting concrete and other paths to interrupt that grass interspersing. The listed sight lines would be damaged. The path, avenue, tree, lawn network, which is the basis of the heritage listing and the visual you see of this park would be affected.
But I think the point made by this gentleman is also correct, that the council will have heavy QCs and it will be a number of community people who are putting submissions in. And I accept your point that there's an issue of the weight and the resources that are behind that. So if there's anyone here...
A tribunal can't appear at an appeal of its own decision. It can't be a party to the appeal. So Heritage Victoria is not allowed by law to appear to oppose the council in front of the Heritage Council. The Heritage Victoria can't do that.
But his point is right, and the essence of what you're saying is that the weight of council QCs will be difficult to counteract, and I agree. And that's partly why we've got this today. And if there are...
There are 2 points. The one that this gentleman stand up.
Stand up.
Then the other is that any community group will need to be... Can you any community group will need to be properly represented.
Yes. Yes.
So there are 2 issues there. They're different.
Yeah, but
the
related.
rules for the Heritage Council are the people who get invited to present are the people who put in formal submissions in February of this year to for or against the application of the City of Melbourne to the Heritage Victoria for their permit. And they got a letter saying, do you want to continue and go to the council?
It's not fair if we never knew about it too.
I agree. That's why I said the
Can
second
I just
issue is
say-
the whole process.
That you can write to the Heritage Council to object to the plans, and they will consider your objection. They may not. They may say, well, no, this is inappropriate, but they will consider your objection.
But it's the council that